I feel like it falls to independent media to sort of tell the whole story of what is going on with this railroad strike. Or would-be railroad strike. It looks like I said, Union Joe has successfully busted that, right? In September, the railroad unions and the railroad bosses formed a tentative, that's a key word, so everybody remember that word, a tentative agreement to avert a railroad strike for, I suppose it was 90 days, because they came to that agreement in early September, and that agreement was set to expire, and they were set to strike early this month here as we are live streaming. The calendar has turned to December, right? And so the basis for that tentative agreement, what that essentially was the Democrats asking their friends in the labor unions, because even though a lot of rank and file has defected, they've become Trump people, right? A lot of unions are still more or less allies with the Democratic Party. The Democrats came to the unions and said, we can't have a strike before the midterms because it'll just crush us, right? I mean, that will just decimate us if there is a railroad strike and the economy tanks right before November 8th. So we need you to help us out here. We need you to sign a tentative agreement to kick the can down the road 90 days, after which you will have the opportunity to renegotiate your contract and try to get yourselves paid sick leave, right? So this is the ultimate bait and switch, because now after the midterms are over and the unions are set to have this out, which could end in a strike or it could end in them getting the basic benefits that they want and need, just as they are about to have this out, Joe Biden steps in and says, no, we're calling on Congress. We are invoking a century-old law which allows Congress to intervene in these matters when it comes to railroads, because railroads are, of course, vital to the functioning of the overall system. We are invoking that law, and we are passing a bill imposing the terms of the so-called tentative agreement. What's happening here is nothing short of diabolical. It is psychotically evil. This is a screwing over of these unions like we have not seen in quite some time. It's really incredible that they did this. This was a bait and switch. Now let me go ahead.
I appreciate the classics. So the Democratic Party kicking the unions in the teeth. I mean, there's like Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah,
this is a classic Democratic Party song. What's amazing is that so many unions still think the Democratic Party is not going to do this to them. Democratic Party has been doing this to them since Clinton got elected.
Absolutely,
they're not on your side. They're not with you. And I understand the unions are in this really trapped between two mob bosses, and you got to decide which one is going to mutilate you least. But there's no reason, which many union members have figured out over the decades. There's no reason to support the Democrats. They're not going to do shit for you. The only reason to support them is the same reason a lot of people in marginalized communities support the Democrats, out of fear of what the other side will do. It's the same reason they won the midterms or didn't do as badly in the midterms as they were expected to do. It was, if you look at the exit polls, there was no support for the Democrats. There was no love of the Democrats. It was just pure fear of what would happen if the other side were in charge. And that's it. So they keep supporting the Democrats so they don't get something worse from the Republicans. And to make a fair argument, sure, if the Republicans were in charge, it would be worse. They would actually give them something less than the contract that they negotiated. They were looking at doing that over the summer. So yes, it would be worse, but that doesn't mean this is good. It's just a race to the bottom. At one time, and this is so long ago now, I think especially younger people, they don't realize this or remember it. Unions used to be the principal fundraisers and foot soldiers for the Democratic Party. Those were the people who really went out and busted their asses to get Democrats elected. And that is where NAFTA is really the original sin of the modern Democratic Party. Because once they passed NAFTA, they lost their foot soldiers. They lost their army. They freed a lot of those people up to drift to the Republican Party or to just stop voting altogether. That was the secret of Trump's election, actually. He got a lot of those working class people who had completely stopped voting because they weren't going to vote for a Mitt Romney. They would just not vote at all, given those choices, lured them back into the electoral system, got them to come out and vote for him on what were, in the end, empty promises. But they hadn't heard a Democrat really address their pain in many decades. Now, Clinton was a master of invoking that word and then causing more of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of these rank and file have voted Democrat for the last time. And that you could say that after a lot of these actions. You're right. NAFTA was where it started. NAFTA was a long time ago now, which means that in the minds of a lot of younger people, especially younger libs, who cry racism when the working class votes for Trump or votes GOP, they don't understand how much this hurts. Well, now, I mean, we should all bookmark this right now because this is an open slap in the face to these union workers. After promising to be the most pro-labor president in history, ha. And after telling them 3 months ago, hey, do us a favor here. This is only temporary. You'll get to renegotiate in a few months. So let's get to Mayor Pete, or I'm sorry, Secretary Pete. All due respect to this wonderful man here. Here's what he tweets out a few days ago, trying to rally support for this intervention to crush a labor action. In the U.S. transportation system, there is no substitute for a functioning freight rail network. I would know because I'm an expert in transportation, as you all know. I'm 100% qualified for this job. I did not get this job simply because I was a willing co-conspirator in the screwing over of Bernie Sanders in the 2020 primary. No, I know.
Or because I
am an authority on transportation, right?
I'm not a diversity hire or anything.
Right. It's not like I'm a diversity hire who's getting this as a prize for helping the party screw Bernie. I'm a real expert. A shutdown would be devastating for workers and farmers across America. POTUS is calling on Congress to enact the deal that union leaders and companies reached at the bargaining table.
Yeah, I love how these douches, they're so slippery, the way they phrased everything. So he's trying to make it sound like we're just enforcing what the union wants.
Well, that's what it is. He's saying they had a deal. This is why I emphasized earlier the word tentative. They had a tentative agreement that they were willing to go through with as a favor to Biden and the Democratic Party so that the economy didn't tank before the midterms. They didn't want to strike before the midterms. And so this tentative agreement came with the promise that unions would be able to renegotiate after the election, i.e. now. And now you're taking that away from them and saying, no, after the election is Christmas time. And we can't have a strike at Christmas time. And so you're not going to be able to negotiate for paid sick leave now for years. It's going to be at least 2 years now before they get to negotiate for paid sick leave.
Well, not only that, I don't think people realize what hellish conditions they're working in. They're putting 2-man crews on 3-mile-long trains. This is another example of how capitalism at this point, late-stage capitalism, is a danger to everyone's lives.
Of course it is.
It is dangerous to run trains like this. When you have a government that's this captured by industry pretty much has a free hand to kill you, right? Who's going to stop them? Look what happened with Boeing. Hey, you see anyone go to jail? Those people should have gone to jail. They knew those planes weren't safe, and they put them up in the air, and then they covered it up and kept flying them after they had crashes until they were forced to stop. Did you see anybody go to prison for that? No.
Well, no, of course not. Well, look, public safety concerns aside, not that those are invalid, those are absolutely valid.
You have half the number of rail workers now that you had in 1980, and you don't have less trains.
And those rail workers, they have fewer workers increased profits, almost double.
Right.
Their profit margins have doubled this
They're not
decade
hurting.
over last decade.
Yeah.
$27 billion in profits last year these railroad companies made. They're cutting staff, which is, as Russell said, risking accidents, creating dangerous situations. But the cutting of staff has led to this increase, this massive increase in corporate profits.
Right.
Paid sick leave would cost them 1% of profits, not 1% overall, cost them 1 penny of every dollar in profit. They are not willing to do it. The union tries to get them to do it back in September. The Democrats say, no, please don't make too much noise about this now. There's a vote coming up. We don't want to get our asses kicked. The union says, okay, fine. We're on your team. We'll wait a few months. And then they do this to them. Then they override them in the 11th hour. Yep. Despicable, disgusting. And the gaslighting from this little piece of garbage to say that this is an agreement that the union leaders and the companies reached. They reached it under duress and or as a favor to you guys.
Well, what he should really do is what he did to black voters in his campaign and just claim to have gotten support from union members he ate in the same restaurant with.
Right, because they didn't email me back saying, no,
they didn't email back. I asked them if they supported the deal. I didn't hear back. So
I said on my way out the door, 100%, email me if you have a problem with this.
Yeah, 100% support, actually, because nobody emailed me.
Yeah.
Please clap.